I'm Dr. Jonathan Curry. I work at Albert Labs as part of the bioreactor and mycelium production team. My previous research is in areas around biofuels, using things like algae to produce naturally derived compounds. And I've worked as a microbiologist and a chemist throughout my research career. And I really got into mycology through a second interest that I developed by finding new areas to study. What I really like about mycology is it's a really accessible science for people to get involved with. It's kind of microbiology without the microscope. So you can go out in the field, you can see mushrooms, and you can get an idea for the things that you're looking at without needing to look down a microscope to see things like algae or bacteria or other things like that. A lot of people like to think of it as the roots of a mushroom, whereas I prefer to think of it more like the tree that bears the fruit. So the fruit would be analogous to an apple, and you would take a mushroom as that fruit, whereas the tree is actually the entire mycelial network that lives underground. But unlike plants, it can span for miles at a time, and it provides all of the nutrients to grow the mushrooms. So these are extensive organisms, and the mushrooms that we see are just very small parts of that entire network. The real interesting thing about Albert Lab's approach to cultivation of mycelium is that not only can we produce psilocybin in a really scalable and effective way, but we have this great technology that allows us to apply it to a range of other different compounds, other different species. And as we learn a lot more about how these compounds have influences on various processes, biotechnology, pharmaceutical, and other different compounds, I think we can really pivot that technology towards this whole other area of research that is really starting to grow. Fungi are really prolific in terms of the pharmaceutical potential they have. There's a variety of different fungal medicines, either naturally derived or ones that have been biosynthesized through the addition of genes into various fungal organisms. So natural components include things like cyclosporin, which is an immunosuppressant, or the well-known penicillin, which is an antibiotic. And then from biosynthetic versions, we've got the multi-billion-dollar Taxol, and a variety of other compounds. Not only that, there are a huge range of other compounds that are beginning to be investigated that are showing a lot of promise for future research potential. The psilocybin is a compound that's present in over 200 species of mushroom worldwide. Psilocybin mushrooms have been used by some cultures in Central America, indigenous cultures, in religious and cultural ceremonies for thousands of years, long before it was associated with the hippie counterculture of the 60s, which ultimately resulted in psilocybin's prohibition that is beginning to be lifted today. As we start to see this lifting of prohibition, we see a lot more fundamental research coming out on the potential for psilocybin to treat a wide variety of medical conditions, mental health disorders and the like. And I think it's really interesting that we're kind of opening a box that's been closed for the past half a century and really getting to understand a lot more about this compound. I think psilocybin is a really interesting compound in the way that it works. It seems like it acts on the brain in a very broad way. The best understanding of it is that it builds connections between areas of the brain that don't normally talk to each other. And it does that by dialing down areas of the brain that are responsible for filtering the sort of stimulus response pathway. I think the application of this process to a whole variety of mental conditions is really interesting, because with things like anxiety and depression, what you see a lot is thoughts will kind of work their way down a well-trodden neural pathway, but by allowing this whole area of the brain to sort of speak to each other, we have the ability to kind of push ourselves out of our normal ways of thinking and find other ways to, understand our situation, understand our personal internal selves. And I think that process is something that people are starting to understand could be applied to a whole range of mental conditions, from obsessive compulsive disorder, Alzheimer's, eating disorders, and a variety of others. There are a lot of new studies being started in this area that look at all these conditions and more. And I think time will tell as to what psilocybin is and isn't effective for, and how we figure out dosing regimes and how we apply that to patients in a safe and effective way.